Hi everyone, welcome to the Bridge Culture. Today we are going to present Portugal with Pedro Mena Gomes. He's Portuguese, but now he lives here in Brazil, in Foz do Iguaçu. So welcome to the Bridge. Thank you for your presence here, for your presentation. As always, we have 1 hour 15 minutes. Theory, and then 5 minutes, 10 minutes for the practical exercise.
1 hour and a half, right?
Exactly. So, please. Thank you, Pedro.
Okay, you muting over there? Okay. I'll just pin my video here. Okay. Okay. So, hi everyone again. I think we can go like this. Since we had a small group here, I propose that we go this 1 hour and a half of presentation. But if you want, just ask for, if you have some questions that you want to ask during the presentation, we can do like that. As we are a small group, there's no need of waiting for the end. Okay, Christoph and Crystal. So just give a signal to Virginia, because my video is pinned, so I won't see it. And we'll just go over the question or the doubt or something that you want to go deeper in the understanding of what I'm saying. And I think that will be good. So we can go through the presentation, but at the same time, stop in some moments that you want to ask a question, okay? So, as in always in our activities, it's important to bring the disbelief principle. So we're going to bring here some research, some of my experience. As Virginia said, I'm Portuguese, but I came to Brazil for living in 2003. So I'm here about 16 years almost. So I have this experience of living in Portugal until I was about 37 years old, and then I came to Brazil. So as you're going to see, I'm going to bring some of my experience. So don't believe in anything that you're going to be told here, just experiments. And so that's how this belief has, you know. So bringing the presentation objectives that were brought in the beginning from Virginia and Jacqueline. So we're going to discuss about the Holokarma of nations based on the consciential paradigm. So it's important to remember that this is influence of the Holokarma of nations in the other nations, and also to understand how we can be connected to that, also seen with Holokarma, let's say, and to understand the difference between paragenetic and the environmental factors. So, as we know, when consciousness has the rhizoma, so rebirth on this planet, they are influenced, we are influenced with the mythology of the environmental factors. And so it's interesting, it's important, it's very relevant that we understand these characteristics of the Holocene, try to go deeper, to reflect, and to understand that today, in our present evolutionary state, this influence of Holocene of the country is strong. But as we go on and we go higher in the evolutionary scale, we know that for sure evolutionists and Serenissimus, they will overcome this challenge of being in the soma, this Holocene. So today, we are very affected by this Holocene because it's strong, you know? So it's important that we analyze it, to go deeper, to understand it. So to see what are our affinities, how we are influenced by it in our behavior, okay? So it's very important to understand it. So that's what I did. You're going to see, and I'm going to go this first time of this part of the presentation, going about a little bit about the story of Portugal, history of Portugal, but highlighting some of the events that I saw that were important to make the connections to the second part, when I'm going to talk about the Holocene, of the Holokarma, and my connection in my research and in my life with the Holocene. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. Just definitions of Holokarma. It's important that we've put in here. So the Holokarma, we have the ego, the group karma, and the polykarma that constitutes the Holokarma. So it's like an account, every one of each. The ego, the group, and the polykarma, it's like an account that we have in the bank. So sometimes we are in debt, sometimes we are in the surplus. We have positive accounts. So to think about Holokarma is to grouping these three types of consciential actions and reactions, the ego, the group, and the poly. So I just have to mention in the beginning that this is a very challenging analysis when you do this in a nation, right, in a country, for a very number of reasons. But one of them specifically is that when we talk about nation, we talk about borders. The nation is defined by their border, right? But if we look in history, just in Europe, if you go to other countries, to other continents, it's the same. It's something, same continents, it's harder to understand. The border of the nation that we are today, some of the nations are very, let's say, new, fresh. For instance, even in Europe, some nations that we see today defining their border were defined in the 19th century, and others before, but not so long. So a nation defined by their today border, it's often, if not all of them, constituted by several groups, different groups. In Portugal, it's a small country, you're going to see, but even in a small country that was the first one to have their border defined, you're going to see that also, we have different approaches, different behaviors, let us say, because they were influenced by different moments in history for different groups. So you're going to see that, I'm going to show you that. So it's a very challenging analysis, this one, the Holokarma of nations. So you're going to hear some hypotheses, some fresh start beginning of the research of this Holokarma, right? So it's very important to say that also. So let's go then, go deeper in terms of understanding Portugal. The etymology of the word comes from the Roman Celtic place called Portugal. So there's an influence of in the beginning of Celtic culture in Portugal, presented by their name, and then the Romans. So in the beginning, there were the Celts and the Iberos, and then Roman came and occupied Iberia. They call it Hispania, okay? And during the Middle Ages, the Germanic tribes that occupied the known Hispania already called it Portugal. And then during the 7th and 8th centuries, the term was to define a small region that I'm going to show later on, that was between two rivers. It is not actually today Portugal, but in the 11th and 12th centuries, Portugal was already the name that was referred to Portugal. Okay, so Portugal evolved to Portugale, G, and then to Portugal. But the beginning influence is Celtic and Roman in the name. That's interesting to know and to say. So the regions of what was today current Portugal, we have discoveries by archaeology that already habited by humans around 400,000 years ago. But then the Homo sapiens arrived about 35,000 BC, and it spread rapidly in the country. And these settlements of hunter-gatherers, so there's hunters and gatherers already, they call it the Iberos. So small groups, small settlements of Homo sapiens that evolved. There were no nomads already, there were settlements. they hunt and they do crops. So they were gatherers already. So about 35 BC, 1000 BC. So they evolved and they stayed by that way, let's say, in terms of living. But in near the first millennium BC, the Celt culture that started in the center of Europe, over there in Hallstatt, they call it Hallstatt state, Hallstatt region, they went to what's today England, right? You can see that, and they came west to what is today France, Spain, and Portugal. So you can see in green the prehistoric expansion. They went also east, expansions to the east. So the Celts were a culture. It's not like different settlements also, but they share the same culture, let us say. So it's not a country. It's like small settlements. So they dominate much of the northern and central Portugal, and they were semi-permanent commercial coastals already. And by that time, the Phoenicians and Carthaginians also arrived in the south of Portugal and Spain. And so we have some small settlements near the sea, in the coast, from Phoenicians and Carthaginians. So this influence of Portugal, it's like you can see the Celts, okay? Sometimes people don't know that, but for instance, in Galicia, you are Galicia. I was showing that in the beginning here in the first slide. The Kale, it's the goddess of the Celtic people. So Portos Kale has influence of that. Galicia, in the bottom of the slide, you can see that Galicia comes from Kale. So it's the north of Spain. So this north of Spain and the north of Portugal over there, they are very influenced by the Celts, okay, the Celtic culture. So that's the map, more or less 300 BC. So the Romans were starting to arrive about 218 BC during the war with Carthage, the Punic War that Roman had with Carthage. In the end, the Romans won, as you know. So they occupied the Hispania, and when they occupied it, there was already some cultures there. It was the miscegenation between the Celts and the Iber, the Celt Iber that were living there. So you can see that we have in pink the Lusitani, the Vetones there in the center. So Portuguese, and you have in the coast the colonies from Carthage, from Greece, from the Phoenicians, when the Romans arrived. And in the center, the Lusitani, there were several tribes, again, several different tribes, settlements. And the Portuguese, I don't know if you know that, but we are called also the Lusitanos. So the Lusitano comes from this small gatherings that already were there in the beginning, 300 BC. And when the Romans took over, they called that Lusitania, that region. I'm going to show that afterwards. But in the south, this also this region, you have the Iberian, also Celtic still there. In the small dots here, we had a very interesting settlements that are called the Tartesian. It was already in Turdetani in the south of Spain. They were there for several years, hundreds of years, this culture. So the Tartesians were they worked very much with bronze, with iron, with tin. They were very good. So you can see that some brooch in bronze there. And they had what was the beginning, let us say, of the writing, an alphabet. So the Phoenicians gave that to the Cartesians and they improved it. So you can see that an image of the Cartesian table in rock that was found in Portugal that came from this alphabet. You know, so the prototype of the alphabet. So it was a very interesting culture also over there, very developed. Carthaginians also were very developed. Phoenicians were traders. They trade all over the Mediterranean, the Phoenicians, and Carthaginians also had a very powerful shipping, very powerful naval army, and they have very big ports. So this naval, this sailing, let us say, was already present in this culture over there. So afterwards, when the Romans took over the Iberian Peninsula, it was completed about 19 BC. They just took over all of Hispania, let us say, Peninsula, Iberian Peninsula. And as you can see that, we have Galicia, they just have some states over there. And what they call it was Lusitania. Okay, so again, as you see, it's not just Portugal, it's a bit of Portugal, a bit of Spain. And Galicia was a little bit of north of Portugal, what's the north of Portugal, and what is the north of Spain. And you can see also, when you go to the north of Portugal, some small villages, they have dialects that Spanish and Portuguese use. It's the same dialects that Portuguese in Spain use to talk with each other. So it's very interesting to understand that even 2000, more or less, almost 1,800 years afterwards, this situation of division is still seen in our present-day culture in Portugal and Spain. This connection between this part of Portugal north and this part of Galicia, or this day Galicia. So this influence, you can see it lasts very long. It's not from 2 days ago. It's very interesting to understand it, to see this. By that time already, the Romans founded numerous cities: Lisbon, that is called Lisipo, Coimbra, that is called Aeminium, and Pax Julia, that is called Spezia, it's in the south. So, and Braga, that is very important. So it's called Bracara Augusta. It's in the north, it's a very important city in Portugal. And it's interesting to see this because sometimes that's a hint that I can give you. When you study past lives, for instance, when you study our previous lives, sometimes, and it's very often not happens that, when you go and see, for instance, I'm studying a country, and so I'm going to study and have connection with this city, and we have the name of the city, of this region. It's important to go back, to go to the history, the historiography, and understand that sometimes, like this situation, Lisbon didn't exist. It was only Sipo. So sometimes the connection of the word is different by that time. Okay, so it's important to go to the historiography, to history, to go deeper a little bit, and not assume that this region had all that name from, let's say, the beginning of the time, right? Because it's quite different sometimes. That's an example. Okay, in 409, more or less, the Roman Empire was crumbling, was declining, and let's say a group of German tribes, I can show here, the Goths, the Franks, the Vandals, the Suevan, the Visigothic came from the center of Europe, and like the Celts, came to Hispania. That was Hispania by that time. So here you can see that already was divisions here. We had Vascones in the north of what was today Spain, again the Galician, and this is Hispania. And again, today you can see that this part of Spain, it's different from the rest of Spain in terms of culture, the Basque region of Spain. So this group of Suevan Visigoths came from Germany and occupied what is Portugal and Spain. And we have a lot of influence of that also. So the Visigoths, by the time that they started to invade, and they took over all of what is today Iberia from the Suevans. So there was a time where all this Spain and Portugal was from the Visigoths culture. But a few, let's say, 2 centuries afterwards, more or less, the Arabs came from the south, from Africa. They crossed over the Strait of Gibraltar, and by 711, they went to aid in a civil war, a Visigothic civil war that was happening there. So they didn't came just to occupy. They was called, the Umayyad Caliph was called by one of the leaders of a Visigothic tribe to try to overcome another Visigothic tribe. But when they arrived in 711, they defeated the Visigothic tribe. They didn't went over. They just stayed, and they started to take over all of the Spain in the beginning, what is the Spain, Iberia. In about 80 years, like you can see that, 70, 60 years, they took over from all the Visigothic tribes, Iberia. So when you see these 4 moments in time, you can see that by 714, Évora, Santarém, Coimbra, until the center of Portugal had been conquered. 2 years later, Lisbon was conquered by the Muslim, Muslim control. So they just stopped there near Francia. They stopped in Poitiers, but they ruled Iberia until the fall of Granada in 492. So as you can see, it was a very fast conquering that the Arabs took over Iberia. In the beginning, they just almost conquered everything, but then in the north, there was a small part of Visigothic tribe that stayed resistance in what's today Asturias, in north of Spain. And after some time, like you can see here, around 900 AD, there was already some division here, the Galicia, the Asturians, the Castile, all tribes, Aragon, all tribes from Visigothics. They started the Reconquista, what is called Reconquista from the Arabs. And in 1150, there's this part already conquered what is the Portugal, so you can see this the borders. And in the end, there was only this green part of Arab occupation when the kings Isabel and Fernando took over Granada from the Arabs. So the Arab stayed almost, let us say, 700 years in Iberia. And that's important because here in Portugal, I'm going to tell you afterwards, but just mentioning it, you can see specifically the influence of the Arabs very strong in the south, and the influence of the Celts in the north and the center, and the Romanics still very strong in the center. Okay, that's very interesting. It's a small country, but even in a small country, you have different types of influence that stayed long from several hundred of years. Okay, I'm going to talk about that. Okay. Well, this small settlement, these small countries, the states, there was a time that states that were taken over by what is the Visigothic tribe, but now the Visigothics were already Christianized. So by that time when Romans arrived, they were not, almost some small tribes, but not too much. But then when they were already Christianized, and they came over. So here we have an image. What was there by that time the Portuguese county? It was a small county that was given to one of the counts, and by that time, what happened is that one of the sons of this couple that was the owner of this county, that was called Afonso Henriques, took over this county from his mother that was going to give the county to another person, so he didn't want it. He said, I want this county for me, to say. And Afonso Henriques is a very interesting person that it's worth, if you have the possibility of having some connection with Portugal, it's interesting to understand this context over there, because Afonso Henriques is a very interesting personality. He armed himself knight, he's 16 years old. He harmed himself, no one harmed him. Say, oh, I'm going to be a knight, I'm going to take over this county, I think it's not to give to someone else. He died about 80 years old with natural death, not in a fight. And he had lots of fights. He took over most of what's today Portugal, and it's an interesting personality. In the beginning, the region that capital of Portugal was Guimarães, here, where he ruled first. But then when he was independent, he ruled from Coimbra, here. Okay. So this was the beginning of Portugal. So the embryo of what is today Portugal. And he went over to the south. As you can see, this is 1,128. If you come again, 1,150 here. This map already Portugal, let us say, was here, not today Portugal, but half of it. And in the end on the middle of the 13th century, 1249, the south part of Portugal is called Algarve, was taken to the Moors, and in 1255 the capital shifted to Lisbon. It's interesting to understand that here we have Portugal, in what's today they're almost the same border. So since that time, the borders are stable in Portugal, almost remain almost unchanged since the 13th century. Okay, but here in the south we have Algarve, and there's still you see about the region of Portugal, the state of Portugal country. It's the kingdom of Portugal, Algarve, and Brazil. There was a time that when Brazil was belonging to Portugal, Algarve was still like I say a nation almost, because it was divided. You can see here the representation. But it's important to understand, and I show you that here a personality interesting for us to understand that this quarrel, this fight between Christians, Visigoths, and Arabs, it's not a division, let's say, because sometimes the internet between them, they have alliances. This personality, Ibn Cassi, he is Lord of Mertola. Mertola is a small town, village here, more or less in Portugal, in the south here, more or less. He made an alliance, for instance, with Afonso Henriques by the time, okay? So he was a Sufi, and he was in alliance with Afonso Henriques. So these divisions, and almost, if you talk about the Arabs and the Visigothic, the conquered Visigothics, they intermarry between them. Visigothic wives marry with Arabs and so on. So this miscegenation gave, let's see, a different culture, not just it's not compartmentalized, not very different sometimes. They intermarriage between them, okay? So that's important to understand. Well, for that time, what happened is that Portugal went on. We had, until the 15th century, some universities were founded. But what is important to tell you now is go over to the 15th century from the expansion of Portugal. This expansion started in the 15th century. We started with small islands from Azores, from Madeira, then from Ceuta. Here, it's a small town north of Africa. So Portugal took over Ceuta by that time, and then started expansion all this coast of Africa, and it went on. Went to Brazil here, to the west, to the east. I'm going to show you in a slides in a moment. And Portugal started to go to different countries. Okay. And by that time, here's Japan. So in the 16th century, here I can show you lots of places where Portugal went. So lots of them in Asia, Africa, America, to India, colonies in India, colonies in Asia over there. So they reach Japan first. First Europeans that reached Japan interact with them. So they brought gunpowder to Japan, for instance. So the Portuguese, by that time, they influenced a lot in the world. They were influencers, culture influencers. They trade, and they trade something that was not quite good. They trade slaves. So that was a problem that the traders, not only spices, they started to trade people. And that was very, it gave a depth, in advance, from the Portuguese in terms of bringing slaves from Africa. You can see here, this was one of the main connections of slave trading here from West Central Africa and here to Brazil, to the Americas. But I can show you this 8 million is the cipher minimum from this West Central Africa to Brazil. So, and that's a number that we say maybe because it could be more, because lots of people trading. So it was a decision that in terms of Holokarma surely will give us some bets in terms of trading people. Another one that happened more or less at the same time was the Inquisition. So what happened is that the Portuguese Inquisition was formally established in 1536 at request of King Manuel I. He died in 1521, but then the Pope, they had already asked for the Pope for the Inquisition, and then it was given to Portugal in 1536 with John I. So the Inquisition expelled the Jews. Well, it was before, but it came after the Jews. That's one image here, representation of the Jews being expelled from Portugal. And it took Inquisition to other possessions, colonial possessions, Brazil, Cape Verde, Goa, and Ghana. In the beginning, it was only to attend religious matters, right? To make the conversions of Jews and Arabs to the Christianity, right? But afterwards, their influence spread out, and it's very perceived in terms of political, cultural, and social influence afterwards. In every aspect of Portuguese life was present this Inquisition, okay? So that is something that is already still very present. I'm going to talk about that afterwards. So this 15th and 16th century was the expansion of Portugal, but by that time, the English and the Spain, the English since the 14th century had an agreement, the Treaty of Windsor with Portuguese. So there's a strong connection between Portugal and England since the 14th century with this Treaty of Windsor that's still valid. And so that made Portugal sometimes the enemy of Spain and France because of this problem between France and England, right? So that happened a lot. Of course, that they also, in terms of monarchy, they marry each other. So Portuguese married French, French with Spanish, Spanish with English. They trade wives, brides, princesses, and prince, and so on. But in the end, they fight with each other. They love with each other again, so on. But what happens is that the English connection with Portuguese gave this sometimes this problem with the French. I'm going to show that also afterwards. But what happened by this time? In 1755, Lisbon was struck by a violent earthquake. So Portugal was very influential in all Europe, in the world, and they were starting to decline. There was a time that Portugal was ruled by a Spanish king, Philip II, then Philip III, Philip IV. They ruled Portugal between 1580, more or less, until 1640. Okay, so about 60 years, Portugal was ruled by Spain, same monarch. And by that time, Portugal started to lose its influence. Portugal started to be smaller in terms of influence. And Spain and England started to rise in France. Okay, and so by this time, in 1755, the city was not as it was 100 years before in terms of culture. But what happened? An earthquake happened in Portugal, in Lisbon, a violent earthquake. We think at about reached a scale about 9. The city was raised to the ground, then tsunami, then fires. It was on the 1st of November, the day of the Hall of the Saints, so, Holy Saints, right? So, in Portuguese was a Sunday. Portuguese was in Lisbon just praying in the churches. So there were candles lighting because of this. So Lisbon was just raised, okay? And this earthquake was felt hundreds of kilometers from Lisbon. Many countries felt that shaking, okay? So it's very strong. What happened is that this person here, Sebastião de Melo, Marquis of Pombal, was the prime minister by that time. And the king was not a very strong king in terms of temperament, of personality. So he gave white card, gave a free will, free pass for Marquis de Pombal to do whatever he wants to construct Lisbon. So he is, let's say, for Portugal, he's a very charismatic person. He did some problematic things also. It's a controversial personage, but it's the last one, and I've been here because of that, that is the reference of Portuguese for this regaining of say, influence, because he reconstructed Lisbon, he reorganized the army and the navy, he restructured the University of Coimbra, he expelled the Jesuits that were very, say, traditionalistic. He created several companies and guilds to regulate commercial activity. So he abolished slavery in Portugal and Portuguese colonies in India. So he did lots of things, and he's a very referenced a lot with us, for us, let's say. When you go to Lisbon, there's lots of influence of this construction. The center there, Marquês Pombal, there's a Marquês Pombal place over there. There's an avenue called Liberty Avenue. It's very wide. And by the time people say, "Oh, why are you going to build something so wide? Why do you need that?" And I know that this will be something important. Let us build it big. Okay, you would think big, let's say. Okay, Marquês Pombal. Well. But by that time, like we said, the Portuguese were not as strong as they were. So in 1807, there was a quarrel between France and England, and again, France demanded that Portugal would accede to a continuous system, an embargo with the United Kingdom. Portugal refused, so the French invaded with Napoleon. So Napoleon invaded Portugal, Spain and Portugal. He arrived in Portugal in 1808, and with that invasion, the Portuguese king John VI fled to Brazil, and that was important also to Portugal and to Brazil that happened. So he went to Brazil between 1808 and 1821, Portuguese capital war in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And that helped Brazil also in terms of organizing itself, of the cohesion of Brazil. And Portugal, state of Portugal, went on, and let's say, ruled by the French. Afterwards, the monarchy just split in. Pedro of Portugal stayed in Brazil. So there was some civil war over there between Portuguese that was solved afterwards. But with that, Portugal lost a lot of influence. Let's say. All the influence that they had, small they had, just went on. So Portugal became a small country, to say, in terms of influence. And in 1910, a revolution overthrew the Portuguese monarchy, and it was replaced by a republic. Okay. And then, by this time, the republic started, to say, with some quarrels, some differences. But in 1933, there was a coup d'état, to say. So a small group of people took over. Found the Second Republic, and the first one that ruled it was Antonio Oliveira Salazar as prime minister. And with that, they started to rule in a dictatorship regime. So it was not democracy. A single party ruled Portugal, and that went on between Spanish Civil War, from the Second World War also, and. In the Second World War, it was not Oliveira Salazar, it was Marcel Caetano. It was Oliveira Salazar still, okay? Then Marcel Caetano took over afterwards. That's here in the top left, it's Marcel Caetano. It was the second prime minister. So Oliveira Salazar went on in 1964, ruling. It was a dictatorship. And in 1974, it's important to understand that here, the Portuguese submit to this regime. So it's important to understand that all these things that happened until now took over from the other cultures, other regimes. They didn't, like in other countries in Europe, that some regime tried to overcome in dictatorship, and the people, let's say, the common people, rose up and didn't let them do this. But in Portugal, we just submit to this. That's important to understand. Okay, this type of submission was part of the culture by that time because of all we have been here in Portugal, living from the last 3,000 years. But in 1974, the state was already crumbling, this single party regime. So there was a military coup again, very, let's say, coup that no one died almost. It was a very soft coup. And people came to the streets, like you see there, and it ended 48 years of rule, authoritarian rule in Portugal. And after that, almost in 1 year afterwards, at least, almost 1 year afterwards, 75, Portugal, in a way that we can see it was very, very quick, but it was necessary, granted independence to the colonies. And the millions of Portuguese that were there in colonies had to flee as refugees. So Portuguese that were living there, descendants, some of them were descendants, some were came from Portugal. They had to flee again to come to Portugal. They came to Portugal, to Brazil. They went to lots of places, but they had to flee. They left everything there. And if you just with some cases with their clothes on, and nothing they could take with them. Just left. So they had to flee. So that's the 20th century. Okay. So okay, we have how many minutes? 1 hour and a half, right? Okay. We started at 1:20, so we have about 2:20, 30 minutes gone. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go over here some data from Portugal. I will not last long here because you can see that in the internet. But before that, Christoph Christoph, do you have any question you want to ask about this part of history of Portugal, or shall I move on? What you want?
Yes, I was in Portugal in 2004, and I was told something about the fado. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Sorry?
Fado, this melancholic music, and
okay.
I was told that still today, people, or at least some people, or it's more in the soul of the nation or so, that they are sad because the colonial grand times are over. But
yeah,
I don't know. Is this just a story for tourists, or does it?
Sorry, can you repeat again? What had they told it to you?
Sorry, the church bells are ringing very loud. Can you hear me?
Okay, again, I think I have the two. Okay.
When I was in Portugal in 2004 as a tourist,
I
was told that this music and emotion of fado. I don't know how to say it.
Oh, I understand. Fado. Yeah.
But I didn't understand really if this was just a story for tourists or if it's really something that is in the nation's soul, that they are sad because the grand time.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about that in a few moments about fado. You are. It's important to understand this fado issue. Yeah, but what is important to understand? Looking to Portugal now here, is that Portugal, before all this history, the south of Portugal is quite influenced by still the Arab culture. Okay, so if you go to the south of Portugal and to the south of Spain also, you see there's an interconnection, very strong connection still between the region and the Arab culture. And the north is more, let us say, Christianity. It's more Christian, let us say, in terms of the influence, and Celt, like I said. So it's very this division is very clear when we live there and we visit. Not only because in south of Portugal we have lots of discoveries from the Arab periods. Okay, we have there and we have castles and the mosques that were converted to churches. And fado, I'm going to talk about that in a few moments, so I'll leave it by that time to talk about that. But fado, yeah, it has a connection. This the roots. It's not very clear what is the roots of fado, but some hypotheses exist. One is that fado came in the beginning from this Arab songs, this mourning that the Arab songs have, and a little bit from the Africa influence. And they gathered this influence in another influence that was when the ships went on and left Portugal with all these men that were going over, and the women didn't know that they would come back. The women gathered all these songs and started to sing about this issue of their husbands who went to sea, didn't know if they were going to come back. By that time, just to make here let's say a metaphor, it's like when you went to this ships, these caravels. It's like going to Mars today, not knowing if they're going to come back in a small ship, right? A spaceship now, but by that time it's a ship, sailing ship. But it was like going to the unknown, right? They didn't know if the people were going to come back, because it was like a very dangerous situation, right? So Fado came from that a little bit. I'm going to talk about that. But yeah, it's interesting to understand because it's connected to the overflow of Portugal. You're right. Okay. So here, the population of Portugal, we are 10 million, about 88 in the ranking of 196 countries. It's a semi-presidential republic. We are the fourth in the Global Peace Index, so it's a pacified country for some time. And we have a high life expectancy of 80 years and a high HDI. And in Portugal is today, we main GDP of Portugal is from tourism, right? There's a lot of tourists. Portugal in the last year specifically, this tourism increased a lot. So we went there in 2004, he said, but by that time there was a crisis. And then after the crisis in 2009, 2011, that you, of course, you know that you are there in Europe. Now, after the crisis, Portugal regained this influence of tourism, and we have a lot of tourists, a lot, from many countries, right? So, yeah. Okay, so this is the geography of Portugal. You can see that in the south, we have more flats, a flat here, and in the center, near Spain. And to the north, we have more hills, some high hills, not too high, but it's more mountain here in the north than in the south. The south is more flattish. Okay, the green one is flat, the brown more high altitude, yeah, more high altitude. So here we have the geography. And in religion, the census of 2011 shows us what we really know already, the influence of the Catholic, Apostolic, Roman in Portugal. 81% of the inquired said they were Catholic. Just, you can see here, the other most important are other Christian with 1.8, and no response, 8%, and with no religion, 6.8. So it's interesting, but 81% said, I'm Christian, I'm Catholic, Apostolic, Roman. So this influence that came with Romans, and specifically with the Visigoths afterwards, and the influence of the Visigoths, that the Reconquista that came afterwards, and then with the Inquisition and so on, it gave Portugal a very strong connection, very strong submission to the Catholic, to the Christian regime at the same terms of not, it was the king that was, of course, the ruler, but the kings in Portugal, lots of them, from the beginning, they stayed Christian, Catholic, different from other countries in Portugal, like the German, the English, and others that were Protestant afterwards, and so on. But Portugal and Spain, for instance, the two stayed Catholic all the time, and this influence is very strong in us, in Portuguese. Okay, you can see that, for instance, in Fatima, the city where the Swiss shepherds saw in the beginning of the 20th century the Virgin Mary, this apparition. So Fatima is a very strong center of Catholics, Christians, right? So Portuguese, particularly in the north again, not in the south. The south also Christian, but this influence is more seen, it's more widely seen in the north of Portugal. But we are quite Catholic, right, in terms of the influence. And in terms of age pyramid, that's important also. We are an old country, in terms of population. You can see in gray was 2008, and now 2018, 10 years afterward. You can see that all these people here grow older a little bit, but there's not too much younger people being reborn with somas over there are not too available, you know. And Portugal, the number of deaths some years ago, already happened this, and it's still happening. The number of deaths per year is higher than the number of births. So Portugal, in terms of population, Portuguese natives born are declining. If that continues to happen without migrations in Portugal, in 2070, 2080, 50 years from now, more or less, or 60, will be about 7 million, 6.5. But what happens is that there's been some migrations. I think in Germany also you can see that, of course. And in Portugal, we had some migrations, some immigrants that come. There's a lot of emigrants, Portuguese, since the travelings in ships, navigations, it's already a country where people go abroad a lot. So that was the root of that. So Portuguese immigrate a lot from they immigrate from Lisbon, from Portugal to Brazil, for instance, by that time in the 16th, 17th, 18th century. Then we start to migrate in Europe, migrate to France a lot, Canada, to more than 45 countries we have Portuguese. And today, 2.3 million live outside the country, born in Portugal, and more or less estimated 42 million live abroad in countries where they have Portuguese ancestry. In Brazil are 40 million, more or less, that have Portuguese ancestry live here. So Portugal is widespread. Portuguese itself are widespread. I think in Germany it's about 170,000, 170, yeah. So it's very interesting. I was there when I was 15. I went to Germany, to my friend's house when I was 15, so quite some time. A small town at north of Hamburg, and I found a Portuguese working in a factory there. So you can find Portuguese everywhere we go. So if you go to France, we see a lot. And in Germany, maybe you know some Portuguese over there already, or descendants from Portuguese, right? Maybe. Because there's a lot of Portuguese everywhere. Okay. So this migration is interesting because it's affecting, it's impacting. The impact of that in Portugal is important because people come with different cultures coming to Portugal. So this miscegenation is happening already. So Portugal is literally slowly changing a little bit because of these immigrants that come. In Portugal, I don't know if you just see that, but these last few years, it's in all press saying it's a very good country to live, it's very peaceful, no robbery, you can have a very good life. So this is bringing a lot of immigrants to Portugal. So people live in Portugal and people arriving immigrants. It is changing a little bit of Portugal because of that. Okay, now Fado. So Portugal it's when we talk about science, literature, arts, and music. Portugal is more connected, it's more well known because of literature. So José Saramago is a Nobel Prize. Luís Camões was very well known also. But what is most known in all world, let's say, is the Fado. So we have also folklore music and dancing, but Fado is most well known. It's a word heritage. And the word Fado is derived from the Latin word fatum. So it's fate. So the inexorable destiny that is stopped by nothing. Okay, so like you asked before, so this Fado, it's to say homesickness, longing, it's the destiny, it's the fate that comes, like I said, before, a little bit hypothesis, not know exactly how it is, but they came a little bit from the Arab songs, then the songs from Africa. They mix a little bit, and afterwards this let's say singing that women used to do when their husbands went to sea. Okay, so you can see that these mournful tunes and lyrics, they often talk about the sea. And it represents the belief in destiny, something that overwhelms the domination of soul, something kind of escape. And that is something that is very wide, let's say, absorbed by the Portuguese culture. This question of destiny, fate, okay? And that reveals in the opposite scene, of course. So yeah, Fado, it's something that you can say it's part of the culture and the cultural model of Fado, the song, okay? Okay?
So is this independent of the time of where the colonies were lost or abandoned, or is this something that is deep in the Portuguese soul, or does it really have to do with this cut to become a very small or comparably small country again?
You mean the Fado, the song?
Yes, so, song and this part of the Portuguese being or soul.
Yeah. The Fado, in fact, Fado represents already by that time when it was created, it already represents, let us say, something that happened there by that time. It was this homesickness, the people, this nostalgia, this concept of saudade. Saudade is homesickness, it's nostalgia. So this Fado came because by that time, this was something that happened with the people there. This traveling that people had to do because they had to discover things. So they went abroad several months, several years. And this also seemed, let's say, this situation gave Portugal by that time this situation of people that stayed here, being with saudade, let's say, nostalgia of the ones that departed in these travelings. Okay, and the people that went traveling also had homesickness from Portugal. So all this started to be represented in the culture with these songs. Okay, so it's interleaved. You know, it's one thing influenced the other. So the Fado today, if you don't see where it comes from, it's like a song that reveals despair. Like here it's said in the story of Fado, despair, thing you can't escape, domination of the soul and the heart over reason. So all these emotions that were represented in the song. But the song was made, let us say, this type of song, mainly in this small song that is this embryo of Fado by that time when people used to live. You know. Does it explain the situation for you, or you still have some question?
Yes, that answered my question.
Yeah? Okay. You went to see Fado, Cristo?
Not really. It was part of some tourist stuff I got when I was there. But this information is now new for me because they explained it in a way that the country lost so much of their greatness and pride.
Yeah.
Was very traumatizing also.
Yeah.
Different.
Yeah, and also this situation, what happened is that Portugal, that's still, and I'm going to talk about that later, but I can just take an advance a little bit. Portugal is still mourning for this moment when we were big, when we were influencing the world, when we were on the top of the world, you know, by that time, 15th, 16th century, Portuguese, oh, how much saudade I have from that times when we were big, when we were influencers, you know. So that's also, maybe someone told you that over there in Portugal, you were there. But it still happened a little bit. So that's also, so it connects with this fado also, this idea of we were big, now we are not so big, you know. Okay, so in terms of science, the Portuguese, we're not the top of the science, so to say, but the first university of Portugal was in Coimbra, was founded in 1290. So in science, we're not well known. We have 4 Nobel Prizes and 2 Peace Nobel Prizes that won in Timor, not in Portugal, but the Portuguese. 1 literature and 1 medicine. Antonio Egas Muniz, that was physiology. So Portugal is average in science. We're not well known. We are known by fado, we are known by wine, we are known by the tourism, but not very much the science. We are, what to say, average, below average, like here. You know, the European Innovation Scoreboard for Portugal, it's a moderate innovator, below average. Okay, we are increasing, we are getting better. Some years ago, we started to have some research centers, interesting research centers, but we're not well known in terms of science. Okay, so going into the Portuguese Holocene, so all this that happened to Portugal, and I'm going to bring you some highlights of the Holocene, because of course, if I'm going to talk about the Holocene, we have to be very detailing in very long presentation. I'm going to pinpoint some important pieces of the Holocene that are influenced by all this history of Portugal and impact directly the intermissicities that reborn Rizoma in Portugal, for instance. So the foundation of Portugal, because of this situation of Portuguese being a very traditional Christian country that was being ruled with Romans, being ruled by a centralized government that was Rome, with the Romans. Then, again with the Arabs, they were influenced by that, and afterwards, with all this Christian center of influence that was Rome again. So this gave Portugal a very traditional and conservative approach to everything. So we have a sense of formality. The family foundation of the social structure, very strong, the concept of family. Okay, so we have a formality dealing with that. We are traditional. We are very polite. This formality is displayed in politeness. So this is stronger in the north, like I said, because of the influence of the religion. Braga is very influenced because it's a very strong, Braga and other cities, but all the north, right? It's very influenced in terms of the Catholic religion. So we are still very, very conservative. Like I said, this is changing slowly because of this migration, but still we can see that. And we are a collectivist society. There's a book that I recommend everyone to check if this theme is interesting for you. Is Cultures and Organizations, Software of the Mind from Gert Hofstede. Is a Holland Dutch sociologist. This is a very interesting book because it analyzes what we call Holocene infections. He doesn't say that, of course. He analyzes dimensions, sociological dimensions. But these sociological dimensions helped me a lot when I was doing my research, and I'm going to talk about that later, about understanding my Holocene and the connection to this group Holocene of Portugal, because he analyzes lots of countries with these dimensions. And he says, he brings that in the book, and I agree, we are a collectivist society. We avoid direct confrontation. So, of course, when you talk about Portuguese, of course, we have different groups, different people. It's not easy to say and generalize and say everyone's like that. It's not like that. But you can see that there's frequently this no direct confrontation. You say, oh, like for instance, the Americans, they are more individualistic. They say what they have to say in the face, and that's okay. Here it's different. We are more collectivists. We don't confront. That gives some problems afterward, and we'll talk about that. If you don't do when you have something to say, don't say it. Sometimes it's not good. So but you are collectivist. So children learn to copy opinions from the others. So there's an insistence in adaptation. These traditional and conservative countries say adapt to us because it's been like this so many times. It's good. So if it lasts, it's good. So this tradition gives this situation. So young leave their family house later in general. It's not promoted that people go young and say, go to your life, try to live. So they stay in their houses. So for an intermissivist to arrive in Portugal, this is one of the situations he has to understand. Or someone that goes there and say, oh, this is a situation to see and to see how to deal with this. Because the tendency is adapt. So don't go and direct confront the others. Say, oh, respect the elders and be polite with the others. So that gives also a high hierarchical distance. So the society and business are highly stratified and vertically structured. I give you some example, for instance, with Germany. Germany, for a long time, has not so unified. He has some tribes, right? Then you have the situation of the Christians and the Protestants, and the people are more, let us say, not the distance, hierarchically speaking, between the boss, for instance, and the employee. It's not so high. So you just have a sense of being more shoulder to shoulder with your boss in Germany than in Portugal. Portugal says, no, I'm the boss. You're the employee. You are there in the bottom, I'm here in the top. No? And so this Roman system of government, centralized, the centralized Catholic system, Roman-based, are strong support hypotheses, okay, that influenced a lot this aspect. So my boss, my system of government is over there in Rome. It's not here. So I'm far from my boss, I would say. So this tradition, conservative issue and cooperative, gives this hierarchical distance a lot. So in Portugal, we feel that our boss is our boss. You know, I don't say everything to my boss. I can have a problem because he's in the top, he's over there, not shoulder to shoulder with me. So this preference of cooperation, modesty, carrying the weak in quality of life. So it's more, society is more consensus oriented. That's the benefit, okay? It's not an individualistic society. We try to be in group with the pros and cons of this. So all these traits is also seen as the pros and cons when you look at it. So you have this approach. So we have a predominance of rigid codes of belief and behavior in the position of societies that when we do the practice, we adapt with the practice. So practice counts more than principles. In Portugal, the principles count more, let's say, more weighty in terms of behavior. So we have rigid codes of belief and behavior in general because of the tradition also. So that gives us a situation where the uncertainty is something that we have some problems with it. Okay, I know how it is so many years ago, so 100 years ago, it's like that, it's been good, so let me attach to this. So if practice is different, we just be suspicious with that. I'm suspicious with new things. And the appearance is important. So when you talk about content and form, people look to the form also, to the people, how they are well dressed, the clothes mean social standing. So there are some countries where you have the clothes you have, no problem, no one makes you or says anything to you because of that. You don't have, let's say, an eye on you saying, oh, dressed like that, it's strange. No, in Portugal, you look at it, so, oh, she has clothes different, so it's a social standing for it's important.
It's interesting because you can see the influence of Portugal and Brazil.
Yeah,
the legacy
exactly. Yeah. Jacqueline is saying about the influence of Portugal and Brazil with that, because in Brazil we also have that here. I'm not talking, if I'm going to talk about that, it's interesting because the connections are very strong. You can see that specifically in many things, but yes, that's it. And like I said, we have Portuguese also seen based on beliefs. The religious beliefs with the old predominance of Catholicism. So the Sanctuary of Fatima, Braga Cathedral, always Braga in the north, so the north is very, very strong in belief. So this traditional Christianity way of life gives all that information and influence a lot on the Gnosticism. We have low levels of mysticism because of this way of being detailed, being analytic in terms of analysis. The principal roots of mysticism in Portugal, they are mainly connected with the Templars, because the Templars were persecuted in France in 1307. They were jailed. They were in jail, but there's a story. No one has still say so. It's a good story, but it's a story that they heard that some of the Templars came to Portugal. That's a fact that you know, because the king by that time, Denis I, gave the Templars the Order of Christ. They changed the name and they started to be known as the Order of Christ, not Templar. And the Order of Christ is some people that belong to the Order of Christ, some kings by the time, and one of the patrons of the voyages, sea voyaging, that is Vasco da Gama, he was from the Order of Christ. So there's some type of connection that we don't know exactly how it is, but the Templars have an influence in Portugal. And all this mysticism that surrounds the Templars came to Portugal, you know. Some people say that these sea travels were financed by the Templars to build all these ships. It's a possibility, because Portugal was not a healthy country by the time, in the 14th century. And then in the 15th century, they came with lots of ships, constructing ships. Where does this money come from? You don't know. So that's one possibility that came from the Templars. It's not something that was complicated.
I was remembering about Saint Isabel.
Yeah, she was the wife of Denis I.
Yes, that,
Yes. That helper.
Yes.
Yes.
Can you talk a little more about this helper?
Yeah, she's a helper that she has a lot of. She was the wife of Denis I, this king that welcomed the Templars. The king that also, as I said before, he was the founder of the University of Coimbra. He did something very interesting things. And Isabel, she was his wife, and she influenced a lot. She has a lot of parapsychic, let's say, traits, and she helped a lot the other people. We hear this in school. When I was young, with 7 years old, 6, 7 years, our books in school they talked about this miracle that Isabel did with roses, right? So she was with some bread, something that she wanted to deliver to the poor, and the king didn't want her to do this. So he asked her, "What do you have in your hide it there?" She said, "It's roses." When she opened, it was roses that the king saw, not food. So to understand it, when I was young, in the school, the books told about this miracle from Isabel. So Professor Waldo Vieira already told us about this personality, this consciousness that was already very interesting by that time, and she was a helper. And she's connected to, to our group today. She sometimes comes in the Parapsychism of us here, in ecology. So she's someone very interesting to study. I bought a book from her 1 year and a half ago to study her. She's not did it, but yeah, I'm going to understand her better. So you see, this is all connected, you know. All this moment there, you Denis first and Isabel and the Templars. Okay, so turning to some of the Portuguese general traits that come from all this that we are presenting to you. This is the result of all this. So we are very good in adapting to interact with other cultures because of the travelings. Okay, that doesn't say that we adapt totally, but we know how to interact with other cultures. We try to do this. We know something to do this because we travel a lot in the past. So it's something that Portuguese in general do. They go to other countries, they live there, they adapt frequently there. Okay, so we have this interaction. But for all this that we have, as told you before, we have a pressure for social conformity. this tradition gives a strong pressure for people to conform with social rules, social rituals, and for an intermissivist, that's something we have to deal with, this pressure of social conformity. And because of many things, and Father represents that, as you've told us, to ask us, Christoph, this tendency of mourning, complaining, valuing the old times. So we live a little bit in the old times sometimes. It's especially because we have an older type of population, like I've shown you, right? So the new ones and this migration is changing Portugal a little bit, but we still see this tendency of mourning. We have a sense of collectivism, especially among family members, of the collective. And we have a high value for detailing. So we detailing things. That's interesting, to be detailed, to look to the details. And we are very literal, the literality in the expression. So to speak with a Portuguese, you have to understand when you ask something, you have to precisely what you want to know. Because if you ask him, how do I go from point A to point B? If you don't say if you're going by car, if you're going by bus, if you're going by what, he says, depends. Depends on what way you go. So you have to be literal. It's very interesting. That gives some jokes between Brazilian and Portuguese and Brazilian and Portugal. The clash of this situation of literality of Portuguese.
I think it's very typical in Europe.
Yeah, exactly. It's not only Portugal.
In Spain, we are very different.
In Spain too.
So more explicit.
Explicit.
Yeah.
Explicit. The literal. We have to be explicit, literal in what we're saying. So if you ask for, I don't know if in English this makes sense, but in Portuguese makes say, do you have time? Portuguese say, yes. It doesn't say time. Say, what time is it? That's the question for a Portuguese to say, it's 2 o'clock. If you do have time, in Brazilian, do you have time? Yeah, I have 2 o'clock. Okay. But to a Portuguese, do you have time? Yeah, I have time. I know the time, but I didn't ask for it. Just ask me if you have time. Yeah, I have. Yeah. So it's very fun. So this detailing, it's something that it's interesting. It's good, let us say, to be detailed. What happens is that when you are detailing, but you have you have this rigid beliefs. This way of being detailed, you start to be perfectionist sometimes with that. You know, in Portuguese sometimes they don't do things because they want to be better, and they don't do it because they want to be more in detailing and more detailing, and sometimes they just lose time of it because of this high level of detail and being rigid with things, you know. But okay, detailing is in the sense is good. So sometimes because of this collectivism, personal success can be seen with antagonism. Sometimes when people is successful, for instance, in America, if someone is successful, oh, this guy is successful. Let me see how he did it because maybe I just learned him. Important to say, oh, this guy has success. What? He did something to this. It's not totally he earned that not totally because of him. Someone helped him, of course. It's not alone in that. So it's the way of seeing this success. So people say, oh, he's successful, but he helped. Someone helped him to go over and climb to this position. People don't see it with a point of view that it's, let's say, let me learn with him to achieve this, you know?
Very competitive.
Exactly, not competitive. That's the word. We are not very competitive in Portugal. Like, for instance, the Americans are competitive. So it's straight, okay? Sometimes this is, in some situations, interesting to do. Sometimes it's not as interesting to be with that. So that depends. But we are like this, so collective. And predominance of rigid codes of behavior, like I said. So detailing with rigid codes of behavior sometimes not good because you go perfectionist. So we have this way of acting with beliefs. And typically we have some boldness to face the unknown because if we see all people that migrate and travel with all these sailing trips, we have some boldness to do this, as I said. Okay, so Portuguese Holokarma responsibilities. I don't know every one of them, of course. I just mentioned here 3 that are more obvious to me. So the exploration of resources in the colonies of Africa, Asia and America, we explored a lot, we extract from there minerals, resources, inclusive people like the slave trade. So all this makes Portugal surely in depth with these countries. Okay, and we can see that with the migrations that Africans, for instance, went to Portugal with the colonies. You can see people migrating to Portugal. You see this thing happening. Here in Brazil also we have. We know that the slave trade came to here, so there's a debt also from Portuguese that lived by that time in Brazil with Africa, right? So this is a strong thing to understand, to see, because that's something very widely known. And of course, religious intolerance with the Inquisition. Of course, we have this responsibility. Of course, here we have Portuguese Holokarmic and the groups, the people that act with this, the slaves, the slave traders, the inquisitors. These things here, we don't know if they're in Portugal now, okay, living there. So this is the Holokarmic consciousness approach. So a lot of people that in Brazil, in Portugal, maybe were involved in this. I'm not sure, but. Surely this exploration of resources, it's a Portuguese responsibility in general, right? And I don't know if I can say that if we are in these four stages of this group-karmic cycle, I can try to say maybe starting victimization, maybe. Decomposition, I don't think so. It might be we have way to go to understand how can we reach recomposition here? Because this, let's say, 8 million, 12 million slaves that were brought to Portugal and Brazil and all the resources. I don't know. My best hypothesis, a little bit in victimization, maybe. I think. Okay, and just to finish, yeah, I'm finishing, and can. You have here more 15 minutes, I see. Right? Right? Yeah. See. I have my intraconscientiality in Portugal also see. I have a strong affinity with some of my personal traits. I study from 1999 the process of repression, let us say, mechanisms of repression. And I could see in me this social conformity, this avoidance of direct confrontation and rigidity of beliefs. So what I can, and since I came to Brazil, this way of seeing Portugal now, not there exactly, we also see Portugal, helped me a little bit in terms of understanding this. When I was there, I started to study, and I think that maybe what I have to say to someone that studies also seen in Portugal, in the country also seen is trying to understand in the self-consciometry, invest on that, to understand what is the issue that you have to understand in you that is connected to your way of thinking, your way of acting and behavior. Because when you do this, you understand you better, and you can start to understand what is the connection between that behavior, that trait, and the trait when you are involved in terms of your love of the country. So I have strong affinity with this social conformity. For instance, I had difficulty to interact and give a question when I was in a group. Okay, I had a rigidity of beliefs. I was rigid. Now I'm more flexible now. But for a long time in my life, I had a difficult way of being more flexible. You know, this traditional way of living in Portuguese is something that I already had in my family, and I had affinity with this country. So the way of understanding this is, of course, to invest on conscientiometry. Self-conscientiometry is the way that I can see for everyone, or at least someone, will understand what is the trait that I have to understand better in terms of my way of behavior. So for me, was understanding this process, this mechanism of repression, because it's the mechanism of repression is involved, is connected to brainwashing. So the social conformity, it's like a brainwashing, you know, adapt, do like this because it's good. So these rituals, this way of thinking, if we don't have lucidity and discernment of this, we just adapt. So repression is not only repression you think about emotions, and repression that you think about, to say, the physical repression that we know. This repressive mechanism is more connected, in my point of view, my study, my research, connected to this brainwashing that we are submitted to when you just enter in this, let's say, brainwashing without understanding that we're being brainwashed. And it's social conformity. If you're going to understand social conformity, you can understand the repressive mechanism.
Very close to European society.
No.
We have this in common with European.
Portuguese, Portugal and Spain. Spain also. But you're going to see that there's an interesting study. If you see Latin countries in Europe, you see Portugal, Spain, Italy, and Greece. These four are mainly where this happens. You go a little bit to the north. France, doesn't happen too much. Germany, I don't think so. Little bit, of course, they have, but not as strong as the social conformity as in this Latin country in general. That's what I can say. Okay, Christoph, do you have anything you want to ask? Any comments? Anything you want to say? Crystal?
Yes, the last part was again interesting to me. When I was in Portugal, I didn't have so much conversation with the people, but when I had, I found them to be very relaxed and friendly. Much more than I guess in Germany or some other countries. And but I didn't know that the background is so with such a strong conformity, etc. So I see again that it's an experience I recently had in Munich. Munich is a lot more conservative also than Berlin, for example. And the atmosphere in Munich was a lot more calm and relaxed, I found, than in Berlin. But the downside, at least from my point of view, is that there is still a lot more conformity and, yes, Catholicism in Munich. So
yeah, you're right. That's correct. That's the same approach that I'm mentioning here. Correct.
Yes. If you I see that everything has two sides. Berlin is a lot freer, but it's a lot more unfriendly, I think, in general.
This individualism, this dimension called collectivism versus individualism. These two, they are, let's say, two traits, like you said. When you go to individualism, it's more competitive, and the competition in general is not so friendly. So we say that people in general are not so friendly, right? But then people have the tendency or have the habit to question more, right? To be more questionable in what is happening, not so rigid, because as things go on, people adapt. Because they ask themselves what is going on, and they ask the others what's going on. So they are critical, exactly like Gia. They are critical. When you are in collectivists, more collectivists, so this is downsizing of this individualism that the people advance a little more quickly, let's say, but they are not so friendly. Collectivism, more friendly, it's okay, but then that's the problem of social conformity. That's right. There's two sides of one coin. Say that a trait, usually we have to be this approach. Look at the approach of the benefits and the pros, and the contrast, let us say, of something that you can see, because it's not anything you can look at it and say everything is wrong. What is the thing that can look at it and say what's the benefits and the pros and cons of this. So in terms of traits, in conscientiometry, it's important to look. And specifically, the approach then to understand if it's more like nosographic, something not so good, or if something like this more a benefit, is looked through the lens of the evolution of the consciential paradigm. That's the, let us say, the point of understanding if a trait is helping or not in terms of self-evolution based on the consciential paradigm. And in Portugal, this strong tradition in social conformity doesn't help. Because people tend, if you go and submit to this social conformity, you submit to the rules, to this, situation where if you question, you are put aside. And that's, in terms of evolution, not as, so it doesn't help us so much to this, right? So that's it. Yeah. Christoph, anything more? We're going to go to the end, to the energetic. Começamos 12h20 no fórum, 1h20, so mais tarde. Okay, Virginia is telling me that we're finished. Let us do 5 minutes of the simulation with energetic work, okay? I'm going to mute here, so choose the way you're going to simulate, maybe with some vibrational states, some movement with your energies. Just go Okay. Everything okay there, Christoph? Crystal? Yeah? You're good?
Yes.
Yeah? Some sunshine entering your house there. Ray of light. Ray of light entering your house over there.
Yes, yes.
Very good. Okay. So just to finish, next bridge.
Yeah, okay.
You want to speak about that, Virginia? Microphone.
Okay. Thank you, people, for your presence. The next, thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. I think it was very rich to know more about the culture. So thank you very much for bringing today Portugal. The next one will be USA, American, with Patricia Souza. She is Brazilian, but she lives in the United States. So we'll be there in 28th of July, okay? Always the fourth Sunday of the month. We have another bridge, we have an extra bridge, okay? It will be the next week, okay? We have with Felipe Portillo, we are going to talk about one theme very interesting, I think. It's about the consciential repression, okay? So we are going to send the emails to the Facebook, but the next one will be on Sunday, the next Sunday, 30th of June, with Felipe Portillo aquí in Isaac at the same time, at 1 o'clock. Okay, so thank you very much for your presence, for the presence in Germany with Christoph and all the presence of the people. There were people from Madrid. I saw Malu and some people, other people that they live in Portugal, like Paula. Okay, I needed to know. Thank you very much for all here, and we see next week. Okay, and the next month with more information. Thank you. Bye bye.
Very much. Bye bye.
Yeah.